Welcome back to the Hardware Unbox podcast for episode 39. It's been a big week of news this week with AMD delaying Zen 5. We discussed that for a little bit, and then also go into Intel's latest updates on the CPU crashing / stability saga. We've got lots of thoughts on that and where things are at the moment. So those are the two main stories for this episode. And then towards the end, we get a nice update from Dr. Steve, which in the last week has received a full medical degree and will be going through and giving his story of all the supplements that you should be buying to make us millions of dollars. So let's get into it. Steve, we're back for a pretty big episode, I reckon, in this week's podcast because there's been a lot of news this week. It feels like some weeks we just make the podcast. There's really nothing to talk about, and then everything happens in the same week. So this week we've had Zen 5 getting delayed and Intel providing an update about their CPU crashing issue. So we're going to talk about both of those things in today's episode. How are you doing first up?
Well, you're going to have to wake me up, Tim, because I am in a low-powered state right now. I was ready for benchmarking. You know, I was primed and ready, and then it didn't happen. So I've gone into a low power mode, and I'm just sitting here idly staring. I mean, until you messaged me and said, let's do the podcast, I was just staring blankly at my desktop. Both of my test systems were off, and I was contemplating. I was getting in my own head, Tim. I was starting to think about reality, life. It was getting depressing. So thankfully you came and saved me from myself with a podcast.
Has AMD really screwed you over on this one? You were ready to go, and then they've denied you.
I have to carefully plan out, my benchmarking schedule. Otherwise, my mental state it starts to decline rapidly, Tim. So we need some new CPUs, and we need them now. So I was really holding out. I was like, okay, so if I do this and I do that, that'll get me just over the line to when Zen 5 arrives. And then maybe to make my life even easier, we'll get some sort of new microcode update for Intel on the tail end of that. So that'll keep me, I wanted to use the word sane, but I'm not sure people will be satisfied with that. But, keep me going. Pretty rough. I'm sitting here just like, at least today's not too bad weather-wise, so maybe I'll get outside and touch some grass, give that a go.
Oh, interesting.
Give that a go. I don't know if I'll create a intricate watering system with some sort of PHP data or SQL database or something like what you're doing, but I'll probably go outside, have a look around, see if I survive that, and then check my calendar. What have we got? Well, the reviews were meant to be going live next Wednesday, I think.
I think so.
And so now it's going to be the Wednesday after that. So, guys, comment below. I need something to do for a week and a half.
Well, hopefully it's not too long until you actually get the CPUs. So there's that.
That's true. Okay, half a week. Buy me half a week. Yeah, it's not as bad as what I thought it was.
Well, you could always take a little break. I mean, you got to test 4 CPUs in the space of 2 weeks, or maybe a week and a half.
You're making me feel depressed, Tim. I hate the idea of that. Oh, God. All right, guys, come up with some work-related ideas, please. Tim's fired. Oh, yeah.
We'll have to send a bill to AMD for your mental health services that's required to fix you up and get you ready to go.
I need an AI therapist.
Yeah, I'd say so. All right, well, if you're not familiar with the news, you haven't seen our main hardware unbox video, which is very similar to this podcast video. We decided to film sort of a little, discussion chat video yesterday. AMD has delayed Zen 5 by 1 to 2 weeks. So originally these processors were supposed to be coming out on July 31st, which is just a few days from now. But due to a quality control issue of some sort, they've pulled back the units that they had started to send out to retailers and distributors and have instead delayed these CPUs. So the Ryzen 7 9700X and Ryzen 5 9600X, they've been delayed to August 8th. The Ryzen 9 9950X and 9900X, they've been delayed to August 15th. So a bit of separation there now between those two, sort of the lower tier models, the upper tier models, and the reviews will be coming one day before each of those dates. So the lower tier models, you'll be seeing those reviews starting on August 7th, and for the higher tier Ryzen 9s on August 14th. So that's pretty much the situation. As we talked about in our update video, AMD hasn't provided a ton of information about specifically what has caused this recall / delay of the CPUs. They're just saying that the CPUs didn't meet their quality control or quality expectations, and there's obviously been some sort of minor thing that they've needed to fix in the days right before launch, because you can't really do too much when you recall it for just a couple of weeks and fix things up. But obviously something minor's happened. They want the launch to go smoothly, so they've pushed things back by a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, you can speculate, you can guess. That's really all you can do at this point in time. There's no evidence that I've seen to indicate what the problem could be. I've seen many theories. Some seem more plausible than others. Very much quality control related issue. What that means, though, the severity of that really could be anything. I've heard theories that there was a problem with it, IO die, which I guess is plausible. So, you sort of said it can't be anything too major, which is sort of true, not necessarily true. It could be a major problem, but it could be a major problem that only affects a percentage, single digit percentage, maybe 10%, 20%. Again, I don't know. But let's just say 20% of the IO dies that shipped out had some sort of defect that really hurt performance or stability, and their initial testing didn't pick up on it. And then, as they say, they decided to go with more stringent testing last minute, perhaps because of the Intel situation, I don't know. And they detected this issue that affected a certain percentage. So they've recalled all of the CPUs, retested them using this new test method, and then sent back out the CPUs that work, and then they've had to rework the ones that didn't work. Is that a plausible explanation for what could have happened? I'm not saying that is what happened, but that's a theory.
Yeah, it sounds plausible. I would have thought that my thinking would be it's maybe a batch of CPUs that were manufactured between a certain date. Like they said, oh, the CPUs between this date and this date, we've just found at the last minute that those particular production run had some sort of issue, or we were notified of some sort of issue with those products. And that wouldn't impact timing too much, because if they're still manufacturing other batches of CPUs, they could just go, oh, okay, well, let's bring back that batch manufactured in that time,
yeah, that's right.
Which means bringing back potentially all the CPUs that have been sent out, because they don't know which CPUs went where, so you have to recall all of them, and then just go, oh, okay, well, we'll send out the versions that weren't affected by that manufacturing run issue or something like that. So that's one potential reason. And as you say, that could be a major problem with those CPUs. It's just that it's not something that requires extensive testing and fixing. It's already been sort of resolved, if that was the case, of course.
Yep. At the end of the day, we're unlikely to ever find out. I mean, to prove it, you're going to need to get a reasonable amount of CPUs and get lucky that they're from the affected batch, or just they're the affected CPUs, and then test them and find the test or workload, whatever it may be, that has, underperforms or crashes or whatever the issue is. And then you could start to piece it together, but you can't really do it off like one or two, because, well, that could just be a defective CPU, right? That does happen. So it's going to be a pretty hard thing to track down without getting some sort of leaked information on the situation. But ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, it's really a non-issue. It doesn't matter, because no consumers are affected by this. Sure, you had to wait a little bit longer, but not a lot longer. It's not a big deal. If people had bought them and then they were running into stability issues, or they were underperforming, and that just becomes a bit of a nightmare situation. So thankfully they caught this one when they did. Ideally, it would have been better for it not to happen, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about how it seems like they've rushed this release a little bit with some of these things. There were some issues around, the testing that we saw at Computex, but it seems most people have come away thinking that this is a good thing that AMD has done. So it's good to see not too many people claiming, oh, this is some sort of botched launch, or, sometimes you see on Reddit or Twitter or X or whatever, those sort of comments pop up. People love to criticize and get stuck into companies, but I think most people acknowledge that if there is some sort of issue, the best solution to that is delaying the release so that you don't stuff up reviews, stuff up the perception of products, which, has been an issue that AMD has faced many times in the past with various different product lines. So delaying the parts. And again, once people have got these CPUs in their hands, once they're seeing reviews and all the performance numbers, people will quickly forget that this happened, that it was delayed by a little bit. People don't really care about that stuff.
No.
People do care if they've bought a CPU and for some reason it doesn't work or underperforms or has some sort of issue.
Especially if it is a trouble-free launch. Like the CPUs come out, people buy them, supply is good, the performance is where it should be, stability is good, compatibility is good, no major issues, then yeah, all good. If shortly after release some sort of painful or annoying issue is discovered, then I think that'll make the delay a bit more painful for people because, they delayed it and still didn't get it right, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But but yeah, as you say, at the end of the day, the best thing to do is delay the product and fix the problem rather than just push it out and hope for the best. That's never the way to approach this. And I'm sure if AMD had their time again on at least a dozen launches over the last 5 years or so, they probably would have taken a little bit extra time to, knock some of those more obvious, or some of the bugs would have been easy to find with internal testing had they had a bit more time to do, internal testing. So
yeah, hopefully, they haven't really done too many delays in the past. So hopefully they've sort of seen the reception to this. They've seen people's feedback on the delay and they've sort of learned that, oh yeah, it's not actually that bad delaying something. Like if we need to push back future launches by a couple of weeks because of whatever reason, then people are generally going to be okay with that. Whereas previously it seems like a lot of the things have been more rushed, like changing prices at the last minute or fixing things with BIOSes at the last minute. And that pushes a big crunch on reviewers and testers and leads to sort of negative sentiment in the reviews. It's a bit of a mess. And it seems like that's been potentially to avoid the theoretical backlash around delaying or missing launch dates or launch timing for whatever reason. So there's always been that sort of, I don't know, maybe worry in AMD's mind, but hopefully that those worries have been alleviated by how people have responded to this, being like, okay, whatever, we'll just wait a little bit. It's not like it's a significant delay either. They're not talking about months. If they delayed it to like November or something, I think people would be maybe a little more disappointed in that situation. But even then, I think most gamers are probably not the sort of they're not going to be pre-ordering this CPU. It's probably more wait and see how it performs and potentially wait for X3D type stuff as well. So I think all of that's playing into it. I did see as well some sentiment in how this relates to the Intel situation. So there was a lot of, I don't know whether they're joke comments or serious comments, but I did see a lot of comments on our video talking about whether AMD has delayed Zen 5 to push the reviews after Intel's CPU microcode fix so that they, I don't know, benefit from Intel slowing down their CPUs if that's required for their fix. I don't know. Do you think that's what's happening here?
I love how you tried to ask me that with a straight face. Like, do you think that wild out there comment that makes no sense? Do you think that's a real situation? I tried. No, guys, I don't think this is some sort of 4D chess move by AMD where they're like, yes, this. First of all, major problems with that one is, do we even know that Intel's releasing? I know they've said they're releasing it, but do we actually know they're going to release it? Because this was meant to be addressed and solved back by May, right? I know you made the joke of which year, but they actually did specify the year as well.
Oh, did they? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I mean, to be fair, they didn't specify the year this time.
Oh, okay.
So they say they're targeting mid-August for the patch release, but they didn't say mid-August 2024. So it could be 2025.
Okay. Well, I think they did specify the date, and now you're making me question everything. Anyway, you made that joke, and the point of me bringing that up is the fact that it didn't happen. So if I wouldn't be holding your breath that it's going to arrive in August because you might pass away. So don't do that.
And it's mid-August anyway, so the CPUs are coming out mid-August.
Yeah. So no, they wouldn't be doing that for a whole host of reasons. One being that we don't even know if Intel's going to do that. The likelihood of them actually doing it and then all the board partners releasing it in a timely manner. Yeah, not great. Also, there's no guarantee that this microcode is going to affect performance. It probably will. That's the expectation. I don't see how it wouldn't, but it may not. And if it does, I don't think it's going to be to a significant degree. And also, it would be very embarrassing if Zen 5 needed, well, I suppose they are current generation Intel CPUs, but if they needed them to be nerfed in terms of performance to be relevant, I think the majority of the reviewers will be comparing Zen 5 to Zen 4. I know there are relevant 14th gen CPUs there, but with everything that's been going on, I think the primary competition for Zen 5 is Zen 4. And it actually is, right? That's not a wild thing to say.
No,
Zen
it's
4
not.
has heavily outsold everything on LJ 1700. It just has. So Zen 5 is really competing with Zen 4 at this point. That's its primary competition, which is why everyone compares these standard non-3D V cache parts with the 7800X 3D. And even AMD is comparing them with the 5800X 3D for some reason. But yeah, so no. As a joke, it's a pretty funny, I don't know, let's say joke.
Sure.
I don't know what to call it. It's a funny thing to say. But yeah, as something serious, I don't know, maybe get checked out. Not sure on that one.
Yeah, I think the only way that the Intel situation plays into this is maybe AMD's, updated or worked on their validation process after seeing Intel's issues with CPU validation and testing for their stability issues. That's a possibility, but even then, I honestly don't think the Intel situation has played into this in any significant way.
I think it's unlikely, but it's not. I don't know. Nothing's coming to my head now. I'll just say it. Like it's not idiotic. Like it's
no, that part isn't as idiotic as
the. sorry, guys. I don't know how else to put it. It's too early in the morning for me to come up with words.
I assume most people who are talking about them delaying the reviews for Intel CPU micro, I assume those people are joking. So we'll leave it as that. I think those people are joking. I think for the Intel, making sure that the CPUs are validated properly, that's less of a joke. That's more that could potentially happen. But Intel, AMD hasn't really had too many problems with validation in the past, so I don't know.
I mean, even AMD representatives and AMD themselves sort of hinted at, given current circumstances, and we've really wanted to double check or triple check or whatever level of checking we're at this point. I mean, that's just them saying things. I know
that could be an excuse for some other problem, exactly. Or we wanted to delay it for XYZ reason, so we'll say it's that.
Yeah. But it's somewhat plausible, and it's plausible. There's some logic there, so let's just say let's give it a Tim's sure.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, one of the guys picked up on it at Computex. It's usually when I say something dumb, which admittedly is a lot of the time when it's just us guys hanging out. But we would say something, and Tim's response would either be sort of a smirk and a nod, or the motion sort of gave him is a sure. And one of the, I don't know if it was Chris or Bale, and one of the guys picked up on Tim's shores, and someone said something serious to Tim, and Tim went, sure. And they're like, is that like a Tim Shaw or is that a Shaw? And then it became this whole thing. So now whenever Tim says Shaw, second guess what it is that you're saying.
Well, if you didn't spout so much BS at Computex, I wouldn't have to pull out the Shaw so often.
I love hearing it. I can't help it.
Okay, well, I think Zen 5 delay, we've probably covered that. If you want more of our thoughts, that's in the video on Hardware Unboxed, so you can check out that. We don't really talk too much more, so it's not like it's essential to watch that video, but let's move into Intel's CPU crashing update, which happened earlier in the week. So this is before the delay of Zen 5.
Before you jump into this, I want to cut you off, Tim. Deco, everyone knows Deco from our Discord.
Yes.
He posted a comment. I wish I could find it quickly and read it to you. But someone was accusing us. This person said they went through our last few videos, our last week worth of videos on Hardware Unboxed, and they were very unimpressed. Oh, here we go. Do you mind? It's a long one, but do you mind if I quickly try and read it to you?
Go. Yeah, I haven't read this one.
I know you love these, and it is on topic. So this comment says, so looking at the video list for the past few weeks for Hardware Unboxed, while Intel CPUs dominate every other channel with info about them having issues, we see AMD benchmarks are bad, AMD Delays Zen 5.
Wait, in the past week? That wasn't a week ago. That was...
Don't fact this.
Okay, whatever.
Don't fact check this. This is, it's gold. I love it. AMD lies about CPU performance. So he's trying to make out that's the only content we've made. Guys, we have 2 videos about AMD using benchmarks that at worst are using published spec that is misleading. Don't know what he means by that. but putting the info right there for you to see. Okay, so it just, the grammar goes bad. I'll skip all of that. Then he says, Gamers Nexus flat out said, I can't recommend Intel CPU to anyone at this time. And we get AMD lies about CPU performance on a chart that has system specs that flat out replace the chart they list. I don't know. A lot of it's pretty poorly worded. But essentially what he's saying here is that Harbor Unbox has ignored the Intel situation in its entirety. And we've honed in and focused on, we're trying to paint AMD in bad light by saying AMD Delays Zen 5, which they have done, AMD's bad benchmarks, which they were, and AMD lies about CPU performance, which they did lie about CPU performance. Like that, it was a flat out lie. They were claiming, I think the 5800 XT is going to be 12% faster in Cyberpunk than a 13600K. Like that's a lie. There's no other way to paint. So anyway, great comment there. We were one of the very first channels on YouTube to talk about this issue, benchmark the updated BIOSes, and highlight that this isn't a motherboard problem and this is 100% an Intel problem. I think we were probably the first channel to actually do that on YouTube. And the thumbnail was like, this is an Intel problem. Like, Intel's to blame for this. We were squarely putting the blame on Intel, and we weren't accepting any deflection.
That's right, because back when the story first broke and was starting to come out, the leading theory was that motherboard vendors had stuffed up, that they had exceeded in what
that was the narrative.
Yeah, they were going, motherboard manufacturers had somehow ignored Intel's advice and had gone rogue and had put in all these values into their motherboards that were blowing up CPUs. And we did some digging. You report on the BIOS updates at Computex. We got some great information from board partners discussing this, which we made a video about at Computex, which people can go watch if they want those details back then. And we were pretty firm that that was not the case based on our reporting and investigation, that this was largely from what we could gather at the time, an Intel issue, that Intel had done something wrong. And so that comment makes no sense. And I think the issue as well with these sort of updates and things is that there's not a lot to report about with this update that's, in my opinion, worthy of a standalone video being like, here's what Intel's saying, because they're claiming that they're going to release some sort of patch to fix the problem. And really, to cover this fully, you need to test what the patch does and see, first of all, does this fix the problem? Do people who have, even though we'll talk about this in a moment, the patch is unlikely to fix broken CPUs, but we have to see what it does, what the patch does, and how it affects performance. And then I've always felt that you can't necessarily take these statements at face value from companies. Like if they're saying that they've come up with this fix and this is the fix, but that it doesn't actually fix the problem, then you don't want to be producing a video saying, Intel's found the fix, this is the problem, they've fixed it. Well, you want to make sure that what you're reporting is accurate. And certainly what Intel was saying earlier in this saga, where they were, in my opinion, attempting to blame the motherboard manufacturers for the problem, and they were producing all sorts of tables of things you need to put into the BIOS and all these different BIOS updates. They were claiming that, not that they publicly made a statement saying that this was the fix, but their advice was that should fix the problem, and it didn't. So is that going to happen again? Like you need to make sure that you're testing it in a way that's accurate and is reflective of the final results that people are actually going to be seeing. So anyway, that's why there's no if people are wondering, that's why there's no main channel video on this just yet.
Yeah. And I mean, in addition to being one of the first to actually break the story and test the BIOSes, which is what you're talking about, like we had, by the way, when I said BIOS just then, did that sound like BIOS to you?
Yeah, BIOS. BIOS.
In my latest video where I talked about one of the best practices, the first thing you should do is update your BIOS, there was 36 comments saying that I said bar high, like all weird things that don't make sense. I'm like, it very clearly sounded like BIOS to me. Anyway, moving on from that.
How else do people say it? BIOS?
I don't know. I just said BIOS.
Is that the American way? BIOS?
BIOS.
I don't know. Whatever.
I was stunned by that because I've said BIOS on the Harbor Unbox channel I don't know how many thousands of times, and no one has said a thing. And then I release the memory video. Is high speed
Yeah.
memory worth?
Yeah.
At the start, I said BIOS like 3 times. And the amount of people that commented saying I was saying like weird stuff, Balin and I were very confused. It was like there was some sort of joke or troll that I wasn't in on. Anyway,
Okay.
and then making that the comment we were talking about even funnier is the fact that during Computex, which was 1 month ago, this video, well, it's a little over a month now, but it was last month. Let's say that.
Mm-hmm.
We did the Intel power spec woes, partners are angry, silicon degradation and power. Like we confirmed the silicon degradation angle at Computex by talking to engineers. And so we haven't ignored this story. And then we did an updated benchmark between the 14900K and the 700X 3D using those new power profiles. So weird stuff. I don't know. Don't know, Tim. So anyway, let's get into it now that I've told you about that little comment.
Right. Yeah. I mean, whatever. Yeah. We tend to wait to cover things until we've got all the information. But anyway, I'm not going to read. I don't think I'll read all of Intel's statement because there's quite a few different things that they've said. But I'll just give you some bits and pieces. So Intel has determined that elevated operating voltage is causing instability issues in some 13th/14th gen desktop processors. And they believe that this is stemming from a microcode algorithm resulting in incorrect voltage requests to the processor. Intel is delivering a microcode patch which addresses the root cause of exposure to elevated voltages. They're still validating CPUs and so on, and they're targeting a mid-August patch release to partners following full validation. And Intel is committed to making this right with customers. They're asking customers experiencing instability issues on 13th and 14th gen to reach out to Intel customer support. They also provided additional information on Reddit talking about the via oxidation manufacturing issue that was discussed on the Gamers Nexus channel. They said that they can confirm that the via oxidation manufacturing issue affected some early Intel 13th gen desktop processors. However, was root caused and addressed with manufacturing improvements and screens back in 2013. And they determined that only a small number of instability reports can be connected to the manufacturing issue. And for the general instability issue, obviously, they're still looking at the microcode patch. So basically, in summary, to read between the lines on this statement, they're only claiming that elevated operating voltage is causing instability in some processors. So while they have found an issue with 13th and 14th gen processors, they've stopped short of claiming that this is the cause of instability. They're saying it is a cause, but is not necessarily the cause, if you know what I mean. And I think part of that, they're saying that Intel is delivering a microcode patch to address the cause of the elevated voltages. But again, they've stopped short of saying the cause of instability issues. And it seems, based on what they're saying here, that they are continuing to look into this issue, trying to validate processes that have been returned and figure out what's going on, which I think goes back to what we were saying, I think in a previous podcast a couple of weeks ago, that potentially Intel still isn't 100% sure what all the cause of all the stability issues is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to claim anything here. Right? I'm not going to say Intel definitely knows what the issue is and they don't want to address it because of reasons, or that they haven't worked it out, or they have we don't know. It's like the AMD thing. We don't know is the real answer. Like I've seen so many different YouTubers and people claiming they know what the problem is and it's this and it's that and this person was right and this person was wrong. I think anyone telling you that they know what the problem is and they're right and others are wrong are full of shit, basically, to put it plainly, because no one really knows. There's theories, there's ideas. It seems like there's probably multiple reasons, and that's certainly what Intel seems to be indicating. But there's so many different scenarios that could be taking place here. Like Intel could know very well what was going on. The oxidization issue, they knew about that in 2023. We never heard about it. People who were affected by that and maybe are still suffering stability issues to this day because of that did they know about it? Were they notified of it? Are they able to get their CPU replaced? Like, we only found out about this now.
Did Intel wait for people to have issues to replace those CPUs, or did they proactively go, well, there was a problem with those, so return them? We would have heard about it if that was the case, right?
Intel had business clients running servers with known vulnerabilities, Spectre meltdown, and they never told them, and they were never going to tell them. Their hand was forced on that. Basically, the people who discovered it gave them, I think it was a year to correct it, and they just didn't do it because it was too hard to do and it was going to cause too much disruption to their business. So they just didn't do it. And in the end, they're like, well, we're going public with this. So last minute, they started releasing patches to address it. I'm pretty sure that's how that situation unfolded. And I honestly think with this situation, they don't want to address it, and they were hoping it would blow over, it would go away, and they could just move on to the next generation CPUs and sort of ignore LJ 1700 problems and let that platform just wither away and die. I really think that was what they're hoping to achieve here. And
I think that is backed up. That's not just speculation necessarily from our part. I think that is backed up to some degree by their actions and what's happened. They started off by, as we talked about, blaming, well, at least the wording that they were using they were blaming board
if
partners.
You can say that now with confidence. Before it was a bit, that's how it appears. But given how this story has evolved to this point in time, you can now very clearly say that they were trying to deflect and blame their partners.
Yeah, they were basically claiming to begin with that the motherboard vendors were using the wrong settings in the BIOS, and that you needed to use the official Intel settings, which they were providing in various tables and whatnot, and saying, these are the settings. Whatever your motherboard vendor has done is wrong. These are the settings. And that turned out not to be the full fix for the problem. Maybe some people, that worked for some people and fixed their stability issues, but clearly that was not the solution. That wasn't the final solution. And then they come and they say, oh, we're going to produce an update on this by May. Doesn't happen. Just straight up, no wording, whatever. They've even lacked official communication at many stages throughout this. A lot of and this is something we talked about in that Computex video, was that a lot of the communication has been either to press, so to us or other outlets, through statements that aren't even the same necessarily between different outlets. Like, you get slightly different wordings and slightly different explanations between outlets, or they're releasing sort of confusing and changing their wording to board partners. So they say one thing one week, then they change it the next week. And then, it comes to Computex, we learn that it's likely some sort of silicon degradation issue. And then we just don't hear about that from Intel in any sort of official capacity for, I don't know, what is it, like a couple months now, basically, to the point where they're finally talking about stability issues and releasing some sort of statement. But even then, it doesn't make it clear in this statement to, like, customers who have bought the 13th and 14th gen are reading this, right? Like, you're reading this, you're going, okay, what's the issue with my crashing CPU? You're reading, oh, okay, some sort of microcode issue. It's unlikely that the microcode patch will fix degraded CPUs because the CPUs have already been damaged. They've been degraded. They can't be reversed to the position that they were before degradation. And so our understanding is, and the understanding that I've read from a lot of other sources, is that this microcode is unlikely to fix those processes. And that still isn't made clear in this statement at all. Like, there's nothing saying that it says the microcode update will fix the root cause of exposure to elevated voltages, but it doesn't say this will fix stability problems on affected processes. They're kind of, I don't know, expecting you to, like, I guess, read their minds in that they want you to contact customer support, I guess, to get a replacement. Whether or not they're going to replace CPUs, I'm not sure. But I don't know. Are you reading it that way? Like, they're being very cagey about how the CPUs may not be fixable.
Yeah, that's right. And they're basically just buying time. And by buying time, they're hoping that this story just teeters out. Like, new AMD CPUs arrive, people start reviewing and focusing and testing those, and then new Intel CPUs come along, and before long, no one cares about LJ 1700, and it's just completely forgotten. I honestly think that's what they're hoping and were hoping from the start. And it's kind of like some of the big stories we've seen blow up over the years. They probably weren't expecting the story to blow up in the way that it has, and so many, and game developers and server farms and places like that to come forward with information and loads of data. And by the way, just to clarify, when I was saying that people who say they know what it is are full of shit, I definitely wasn't taking shots at Gamers Nexus or Wendell. Like, those guys haven't said. I've seen people taking shots at Wendell and Steve for spreading misinformation, but really, they're the solution to this problem. They're digging in, they're asking questions, and both guys...
They're proposing a bunch of different possible causes. They're not saying it is definitely this, which I think is what you were trying to say. It's no... People shouldn't be claiming that it's definitely this or definitely that.
And neither of those guys have done that. They've both just said, this is a potential problem. This is a lead. We've dug into that data and discovered this. Some things that they've been able to prove, like, they are crashing, for example. They've said they're crashing. Here's the data logs. But they haven't said they know what the fixes or exactly what the problem is. They're speculating, they're investigating, and they're trying to find that out. And by applying pressure to Intel, which is what everyone should be doing to get to the truth, get the solution. And I think the most likely scenario is the fact that Intel knows very well what the problem is. It would be very strange to me that they couldn't work out what was going on with their own products and what they were seeing. They must have, after all these months, they must have a lot of information, a lot of data, a lot of CPUs, and they can find out exactly what's going on with these. So I think they know. And I think the problem is unfixable, and to fix it or to correct it would be hugely costly to them. I think it's just not I think it's not an option for them to address it correctly. I just don't think they can.
I think that there's different levels to that as well. There's, for example, I think it's likely to very likely that Intel knows that the CPUs have been degraded. So that's, again, we've heard it from board partners. There's widespread reports from all the different sources that are looking into this that are pointing to this being the CPUs are degraded to the point where they can't be reversed.
And logically, that made sense from the start, which is why we speculated to that happening.
100%.
It was very obvious that was happening.
Yeah, I think it's possible that Intel doesn't know why all of the CPUs have degraded to the level that they have. That is potentially a very difficult problem to solve, to figure out, it was this specific scenario doing this specific thing over this period of time that caused the level of degradation that causes stability issues like that. That's difficult to solve, but that doesn't change the situation all that much, because if they know the CPUs have been degraded, it doesn't really matter all that much to consumers what the specific cause was. They've been degraded. Which means there needs to be some sort of resolution or restitution to customers. So if they know it's degraded, they know that there's stability issues, in my opinion, that means they need to replace the CPU. And they could right now make a statement saying, hey guys, we have figured out that 13th and 14th gen CPUs, the stability issues are caused by degradation, and degradation is not reversible. Therefore, if you're affected by stability issues with your processor, you need to return it to us and we'll provide you a new CPU or refund or some sort of thing there, right? They don't need to tell customers, your CPU degraded because we meant to send it 1.501 volts and we accidentally sent it 1.508 volts over a period of 4 months, and that caused, a 2% degradation to the silicon. Like, we don't need that. That's internal stuff for them to figure out to make sure it doesn't happen again. But if I agree with you, that if they know that it's been degraded, which I think is there's just no way they don't know that. they would know that.
Well, the board partners know that.
Well, yeah. I think the statements that they need to make need to be a bit clearer on this. That not saying things like, if you're experiencing instability issues, reach out to Intel customer support for further assistance. Just lay it out. And I agree. I think that if they're telling people, hey, we need to replace your CPU because it's degraded, like there's nothing we can do, it's not a fixable problem with that particular unit that you've got. How many units are they looking at replacing? Like, there's been reports from those sources of game developers and people using them as servers and things that a significant percentage of these processors have crashed in stock configurations. So, that's a pretty severe and dicey issue to, like, that's a big cost for Intel. So they'll be trying their best to not do that.
Yeah, I think what they want to do is, like I said, they're buying time. They're hoping this gets brushed under the rug. And what they're going to do is they're going to go to their biggest clients, the people that spend the most money with them, and just say, yeah, look, problem, here's a fresh tray of CPUs. We're going to replace everything for you. But the person who went and bought a pre-built system from, a big tech chain or whatever, Best Buy or whoever in the US or whatever it is in your region, they don't know about them. Like, just, that's a you problem. And that's pretty much how they want to play this. Because let's be honest, if you take Gamers Nexus, Linus Tech Tips, Hardware Unboxed, and the other, I don't even know how many tech channels there are at this point, and all the websites, take all them, the majority of people who are buying these systems aren't watching Linus or Hardware Unboxed or Gamers Nexus. Like, most of my mates who play computer games don't even watch tech videos. They don't care. They just, they watch game reviews and gaming content or something completely unrelated. They play video games to relax on their PC. They don't care about the hardware. It just needs to work. And I think that you could comfortably say is the vast majority of people who would have an Intel CPU, right? They're not tech nerds who like to keep up with benchmarks and all the latest drama in the industry. They just buy the system.
Yeah, they might look at those videos when they're buying a product, but maybe not even then.
Yeah.
Like, that's at most when they would watch.
I mean, yeah, a lot of the guys I know don't even do that. Like, they'll just, buy expensive best computer from PC Case Gear or something. So my point is, those people who are the majority, in my opinion, aren't even going to know about this. This is, off their radar. So it's not a thing, and Intel probably knows that, or I'm sure they know that. So it's not going to... It's easy for it to blow over in that sense for Intel. But also, the other problem to that angle is when they do release this microcode, if it does, let's just say it does reduce it's going to reduce degradation, right? Degradation always occurs, but it's going to slow it to the point where it's a non-issue, as it should be. The people who have bought these computers, they're not updating their BIOS to this new safe microcode, which is why AMD delaying Zen 5 to solve whatever problem it was is a big deal in the way you should do it. Because once these things are out in the wild, addressing them entirely, it's mission impossible. It doesn't happen. If these CPUs were all going to die in a year from now because of the current microcode, then 90-something% of them are going to die, because there's just no way, unless you can roll out some sort of automatic update, and then, that's the
automatic BIOS update. Ooh.
Yeah,
sure. I know they do it for laptops and stuff. But
yeah, that's a whole other disaster waiting to happen. But anyway, my point is, those people are going to be none the wiser, and they're not going to be updating microcode either. So
I think that's why Intel was trying heavily to focus on the power profile fixes to begin with. The hope was that they could tell. I mean, again, a lot of this video is speculation. So I just want to make that clear. We're not saying that Intel has confirmed to us in any way that this is what's happened, but it seems that Intel's hope was, let's create a baseline and performance profile or whatever, tell customers to use that, and hope that that results in better stability for their chips. So then we can tell people to use that instead of replacing the CPU or some sort of, I don't know, more costly solution, let's say. And even then, like, that isn't a solution for the problems that you've been saying of people not going into the BIOS or updating the BIOS or doing anything related to the BIOS at all. So it's when you're talking about issues that are related to degradation, the cat's out of the bag. Once those things are out in the wild, it's hard to go backwards. And yeah, like, there are bugs and fixes where you could release a microcode and you fix the problem, there's no degradation, the CPU goes back to normal. And then when customers come to you and say, oh, why is my CPU crashing or whatever, you can reverse the problem with very few issues. But when you're talking about degradation, I don't know, at some point, is there a point in the future, a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, that all of these processes stop working? Is it a matter of time where some customers have gotten unlucky, their CPUs have died within months, but all customers will die within 3-4 years? Because CPUs normally would last a lot longer than that. So
Yeah, and normally you really can't kill them, especially stock. It's
yeah,
not going to happen. Like you're never going to be able to use one long enough to kill it. So yeah, I think, yeah, because of course there's people who are saying, this is fake news or whatever the old fake news. I've got a 1300K or I've got a 1400K and mine's overclocked and tuned and it's super fast and it's not crashing. It's like, okay, well, maybe you won't have a problem, or maybe in a year or less than a year you'll have a problem. So there is a problem though. Like you can't. Some of these things you can brush under the rug and say, oh, it only affected with certain motherboards, or there was a small sample of CPUs or a batch or whatever. It's a non-issue. It's been addressed. But this situation hasn't been addressed. And I think that's how Intel was tackling it initially, as sort of, it's a small issue. Don't worry about it. And the story has continued to grow and the reports have continued to increase to something we've never seen before, like an overwhelming number. And I think that points to the fact that, yeah, most of them are probably going to have a problem at some point. And
yeah, I think it's the reporting has really enabled some of the big clients of Intel, like game developers, people who are buying massive amounts of CPUs, much more than general consumers or even system integrators and builders. It's enabled them to start figuring out, we had all these crashes and, let's look into the data and we're seeing, it is actually these sort of CPUs. And once that sort of information starts to get out, business customers who are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on parts from a company like Intel, not exactly going to be happy if 50 to 100% of their CPUs stop working or are having crashing issues. And I think that's really the tipping point where Intel is much more likely to try and solve this seriously, because if it's just like you've talked about it, if it's just a few people like us using systems for gaming and it crashes a few times, Intel's like, okay, whatever. But if there's a customer who's potentially spending hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars on Intel CPUs and they've had a bad experience this generation, that impacts future generations and the likelihood of that customer to buy Intel again. And so once those customers start getting affected, it goes from Intel being able to like, whatever, hopefully there's some sort of fix, to like, oh, oh no, we gotta fix this.
But even then, normally that sort of stuff would be communicated internally.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be this like, hey, we're going to take to Twitter and provide data on how many of our servers are crashing. Like that just would never normally happen without first Linus Tech Tips and Gamers Nexus reporting on it, and countless others all reporting on it. Like there's been this platform-wide push where people have been reporting on these Intel problems, and it's been all across social media. So when you start seeing Intel stability issues reported left, right, and center, like everywhere you look, everyone's talking about it, then yeah, they as you say, they look at it and it helps their case, I suppose, because as was the case with the board partners, like they're frustrated because A, they're being thrown under the bus, and then B, they've been given no real guidance or support. And they're the ones who are copping all the backlash from their customers, like your product's killing my CPU, this is your fault.
And that's possibly what some of those big business customers were doing. Instead of pointing the finger at Intel for the CPU having an issue, they might have bought 1,000, 2,000 gigabyte motherboards and gone, Gigabyte, what are you doing? You're blowing up my CPUs here. And if Intel's saying in the public that, oh, hey, those board vendors, they weren't using the recommended Intel settings, and here's the table of settings that you should be using, that's not a good position for board partners to be in if that's not the real cause of the problem.
It explains why every employee, didn't matter what position they were in the companies, were furious with this situation in Computex, at Computex, and were very willing and happy to talk about it because of that reason. Like they've just been thrown under the bus. It's created so many headaches for them, and it's actually not their fault. So everything they've been doing, and this is what, even to this day, so many people don't seem to understand this, despite the fact that we've tried to provide all the evidence that Intel has allowed them to do this. Like people go, oh, the motherboards are just setting the power states, sky high, and they're doing this and they're removing safety limits and they're removing that. This has all been, some of it Intel will say is in spec or whatever, but basically Intel has allowed all of this. And at no point over the last, how many years have we sort of been seeing this for now?
6 years.
At no point has Intel pulled any of them up and said, oh, actually, you shouldn't be turning that off because that can compromise the quality of the product.
And I think that the really key point about this is that they have pulled up board vendors for other things.
Yeah,
so
like unlocking CPUs and stuff.
Yeah, so unlocking CPUs, BCLK overclocking, memory overclocking on B series boards. They're like, nah, gotta.
They're on that
get
real
rid of
fast.
That.
Yeah,
but if it's turning off the CPU safety limits or running at crazy amperage limits, current limits, whatever, just that's fine.
Yeah. Go bigger number better.
Go wild on that. So we've been very consistent on this issue, but I think my takeaway from this statement, where things lie at the moment, is that it's good to get a statement. So I don't want to say Intel should not be providing statements like this. It's good to get some information about what's going on. And again, reading into it, it seems like this isn't the full explanation because they're saying that this only affects some CPUs. I think Intel needs to be very clear about what they are providing to customers to fix the problem. And it's not what the cause is of the stability issues. We don't need to know the technical details. What I'd like to see is a definitive action plan for affected customers. So if you're seeing this issue, this is what we're going to do. Admitting that potentially these CPUs are not fixable is probably the first step into that.
That is a last case resort, Tim. They've definitely had crisis meetings and strategized on the most cost-effective ways of handling this. And your solution is just at the end of it's the last resort. When all else fails, it's and I'm not even sure that's a lever they're willing to pull.
Yeah, I mean, Intel, they don't need to necessarily say the first step in this is replacing the CPU. It could very well be, hey, we're going to request that you try XYZ solutions first, whether that's, again, BIOS profiles. And whether or not that's satisfactory, like telling someone to run their CPU slower is probably not that satisfactory. But I'd understand if they said, CPUs have degraded, we think this will fix it without having to send back the CPU, but if that doesn't work, we'll replace the CPU. Oof. But these statements are not if I was a customer and I'd bought a 13th or 14th gen CPU, this statement is not adequate. This is not alleviating my concerns as a customer and doesn't give me confidence that Intel will make it right for me. That's my takeaway from reading this statement.
I don't know. I was about to say AMD would do the same thing. They're a for-profit company, right?
Yeah.
They want to make money. They don't want to lose money. So I think AMD would be, I don't know, is it even worth bringing up? But would they handle this better, or would they do everything to get out of it? I don't know. I think AMD would initially handle it the same way. They would try and brush under the rug and make it go away. But generally, AMD has been pretty quick to crumble when there's been massive, and I'm talking just enthusiast level pushback. They generally revert back on things or try to address stuff. But I mean, this is such a catastrophic level failure. I can't overstate how disastrous this is, if it is indeed what it seems to be.
And potentially AMD would have more CPUs to deal with in this sort of situation because they sell more. Although that said, this Intel CPUs, while they do get outsold significantly for DIY customers,
they don't
in other markets. So business customers still buy a lot of Intel CPUs, system integrators, all that. So it's
I saw this morning as well that this stability issue, while Intel claimed it doesn't affect laptops, there's mounting evidence that is not true, and this does also affect mobile parts. Not sure how accurate that reporting is, but there are reports popping up that
I'm sure the laptop guys, like our mates over at Jared's Tech, will be interested in looking into that.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, basically, Intel does have a history of handling stuff like this very poorly, being very anti-consumer, and
they've not necessarily for this specific issue, but they have been
sued.
I'm
talking about the last 20 years that I'm aware of. It's very Intel to just not address this and try and make it go away by almost whatever means necessary.
I think AMD has a slightly better track record of handling these sort of things, but there's been no scenario I can immediately think of that is of this scale. So it's hard to know
Yeah, that's right.
what they would have done, because a lot of the products that have been affected with various issues have been either very small solvable issues and it doesn't require significant replacements. Like, for example, when those Asus motherboards were overvolting the Zen 4 CPUs and they were blowing up, basically, we're not talking about 50% of all 7800 X3Ds that have been sold. It's a few. So it's much
Yeah.
easier to solve that and be like, we'll make this right, we'll fix up those customers. But if you're talking about effectively needing a recall or some major fix for thousands, hundreds of thousands of customers, again, they're a for-profit company. I don't think that they'd be rushing to be like, yeah, we'll fix all these CPUs for everyone.
Yeah, that's right. I think it was maybe even the last podcast I said to you, do you think AMD's slowly but surely becoming a more anti-consumer as they become more dominant? Because I sort of get that feeling. Because if you look back to, I guess where AMD's won a lot of favor with people, they allow CPU overclocking on their budget chipsets. So they've opened up support, and you can overclock, and there's no locked CPUs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a friendlier approach, but they've provided that friendlier approach because they've been in a position of disadvantage, right? Like, they were non-competitive when Ryzen first hit the scene, so they had to make the CPUs cheap. They had to make the motherboards cheap. They had to, not lock down the platform to anywhere near the degree that Intel does. So that's where they get that friendly sort of appearance from. And they've also done things like when they had the broad platform compatibility with AM4, there was a period there where they didn't roll out as smoothly as they could have with, might have been Zen Plus or Zen 2. And they were sending people out like CPUs to flash their BIOS with, and then you had to return those CPUs. They had like a program. I don't know how many regions that was active in, but there was a program there where they were basically facilitating people's ability to flash boards with using, because basically if you bought a current, like say a Zen 2 CPU, there was no BIOS flashback, so you needed a Zen Plus CPU or a Zen CPU to end up flashing the board to support the new CPU. So, that's a situation that happens whenever you have a new generation of CPU that supports an old motherboard, but obviously BIOS flashback now mitigates that problem. Anyway, they've done stuff like that in the past, where I can't imagine Intel ever having a program where they're like, we'll send you a CPU out to update your budget board. Like, the Intel programs that are sort of in that vein are for the most premium KS type owners. Like, we'll give you some sort of special treatment, like what you get from a luxury brand or whatever, but they don't look after the peasants like me and you. So
Yeah, but again, like that CPU flashing solution was, again, because they did not have the market share, so they needed to convince customers that they'll be supported. So
that's right. So they look like the good guys, but they're just trying to be competitive, and that's why, as they get more dominant, you're seeing more dodgy looking Nvidia like products being launched with names that don't quite make sense. They're selling old binned crappy silicon under a name that it shouldn't be sold under. I feel like they're definitely doing more of that these days than they ever have before. So, yeah, I basically, I guess what I'm trying to say is you really shouldn't trust AMD any more than you trust Intel or Nvidia. They're all for-profit companies. They're all trying to extract maximum profit.
This is why people shouldn't be, I don't know, simping for companies. The sort of the usual fanboy type stuff is that,
they all
AMD may have been the quote unquote good guy for a period of time and tried to help out consumers and had that sort of underdog, let's root for them, sort of position.
Mm-hmm.
And fair enough, they did do that for a period of time, but that is not because, I don't want to torch employees, because I'm sure there's some employees that are trying to do the right thing, and there's a lot of people at companies that we've met that fall into that category, but that's a business decision. That's not so much a, hey, all of our employees are on the same page that we need to like do good stuff. Yay, do good, right? That's because they had like no money. They literally were on the verge of bankruptcy because their products were failing and not being popular and successful. So that strategy of getting people to fight for them as the underdog, that was a business move. And over time, as things improve for them as a company, they've kept some aspects of that, but that's just the way business works.
Oh, I feel like there's some aspects that they probably would like to cut back a bit, but you can't offer a certain feature for so long and then take it away. So they're kind of stuck with that now. And then I guess that's why Intel's been to this date so reluctant to meet AMD on a lot of these features, because once you offer that feature, taking it away is, it's not easily done, not without some backlash.
Yeah, that's right. So I think that probably covers the Intel CPU update situation at the moment. As we talked about, you will see videos on the Hardware Unbox main channel about this once the updates and things have been rolled out, so that we can test them, see how they perform, see what the impact is.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we like covering news on the podcast. So if you're a podcast listener, hey, you've already got the main place that we've been talking about this. And certainly there's been plenty of podcast episodes discussing each of the incremental updates. So if you want these type of discussions, podcast, great place to continue to hear about that. But yeah, once the stuff is available to be tested, you can bet that we will be testing it and seeing what the impact is and continuing to follow this story. Because as I said, I don't think this is the end. This is not an adequate statement or solution for customers, in my opinion. And we're not going to just let them sweep it under the rug, as we believe that they're potentially thinking of doing. So we'll keep following it. We'll see where that one goes. Other people are all over this at the moment as well. So there's plenty of content if you want to follow it. And yeah, that'll do that one, I think. But for now, we'll take a break and we'll talk about our boring lives. All right, Steve, Intel CPU discussion is over. What has been happening?
What has been happening? Like I said, I've been sitting here doing this, just like waiting at the door. Where's the delivery guy? Where are my CPUs? I need something to test. But apart from that, I haven't done too much work on the Hardware Unbox gym, so that's still just a couple of posts in the ground at this point in time. So that's disappointing, but the weather hasn't been great still. Today's sunny outside right now, Tim, so like I said, I'll be getting out there shortly. But yeah, not too much. But I do have some health news. Dr. Steve is here to report some health.
Fantastic. Getting our channel demonetized.
Yep. Yeah, I've got now I'm a certified doctor. Listen to all of my medical advice. Yeah, that's obviously not true. I have a very crude, and I've worked out limbs, like how my limbs work and stuff like that. So that's where I'm at in terms of biology and medical science. So Tim's just about to hit me with a sure, aren't you, Tim?
I am keen to see what Dr. Steve has to say.
No, well, if you recall, many podcasts ago, I said now that I'm at this advanced age of 40 years old, that the last 2 years I've got more sick than I have for the rest of my existence, the 38 years predating that. And that was concerning. And I was trying to work out why that was. And a few other people, like Balin, reckons he's more sick these days than he used to be. And, is it something to do with the lockdowns or, COVID, or what is it? Anyway, and I also stated that over the last at least 2 years, but probably the last 3 to 4 years, I've been eating healthier than I ever have before in my entire life. Like I used to drink a lot of soft drink, haven't had a soft drink for years now. Apart from when we're at Computex and I get stuck into those Starbucks, Tim, I come back about 5 kilos heavier. But no, generally speaking, very healthy diet because I don't exercise as much as I would like to, though I have started exercising a bit, but still getting really sick. And the other reason is I've got 2 kids, so that obviously doesn't help. And my wife generally, she's always gotten sick a lot, but usually she would get sick and she'd be like, I hate you. Why do you never get sick type situation? Except I've been getting sick with her for the last 2 years. Now, I'm not going to tell this story, but I know a wizard, okay? That's a story for a separate day. And he fixed my back many years ago, and my back has been awesome ever since. Before we went to Computex, I thought I'm going on a 10-hour flight. Maybe I'll go see the wizard. So I went and saw the wizard. And he said, if you're taking a long flight, you should get liquid garlic because it's a super immune booster. And he's this guy is 85 years old, and he sees about 12 people a day, And he says a lot of them come in sick and whatever, coughing and whatever. And he says he hasn't been sick for years, and he has this liquid garlic. So I'm like, you know what?
This sounds, I just want to preface this by, this sounds like the biggest load of crap so far.
So
you're saying about a wizard who's telling you to eat garlic.
Don't question the wizard, Tim. You know about the wizard, right? I've told you about my wizard.
Sure, he fixes backs or something?
Yeah, he fixed my back, and my back had been absolutely rooted for almost 20 years because I used to play hockey, like ice hockey, and I got smashed by a guy that weighed about 110 kilos, and it wrecked my back. And I've been managing severe back pain for a long time. And this guy, like, I'd been seeing many different people about this. I don't want to talk about this, Tim, because this is a whole other topic. But he looked at me and he was like, yeah, I know what's wrong with you, this and that. And he readjusted vertebrae and whatnot. And he goes, you'll be fine now. And my wife, who was there, she said to me, she's like, if I didn't know you, I would think this is like a scam. Like, you were in on this. Like, you two are just full of it. Because I went in there almost in tears, like the most pain I've been in my life, because I ended up doing my back again after like 20 years. And he fixed me. And ever since then, I've been so much stronger and had no back pain. So that's a separate thing that we may have talked.
Physio wizard man.
Yeah, well, I've been to many physios, and you know they give the massage and they say do these 10,000 exercises and you'll be fine. And you know, a week later it's back to the way it was. So anyway, I have not had. There's definitely not been a 2-month period over the last 2 years where I haven't got some sort of sickness, whether it be, you know, just a mild cold or, you know, I wouldn't say I've been bedridden over that period, but I've just, yeah, it's been rough. So anyway, it's colic aged garlic extract liquid, cardiovascular health, and I don't take this all the time. As soon as my wife gets sick, it's a quarter teaspoon and I take it twice a day. And my wife is very sick right now. Feel bad for her. She's been very sick for 3 days, and so have my 2 daughters. And I've got a bit of a tickle in my throat every couple of days. It just goes away by lunchtime and I feel great. So I don't know, but they've been sick about 6 times since I've started using this. Haven't got sick once. And to add to this story, Tim, you know, I said I've been eating really healthy for the last 2 years, which is true. What I've cut out of my diet almost entirely, pretty much entirely, is garlic. So prior to that, which is where this story gets a bit interesting for me, is I used to eat a lot of garlic, but my wife has food intolerances and so do one of my daughters. And they both are lactose intolerant. And if they have even a little bit of garlic, within the hour, it's not pretty. Like, it just does not go well for them. So that's one of her food intolerances is garlic. So we just stopped having garlic. And she sort of got diagnosed with this just before the pandemic. So from that point, I'd have garlic bread all the time and, you know, garlic all over my steak and anything I could put garlic on, I was loving it. I was a big garlic fan, and she always hates the smell of it. She didn't eat much of it, and it always made her feel a bit queasy if she had a tiny bit. And then, yeah, they found out that, you know, cheeses and garlic and dairy wreck her, like absolutely wreck her. So I was like, well, I won't have garlic anymore. And I stopped having garlic, and then I just got sick all the time. And now I've gone back to this extreme. So I know it's a podcast, but you can't. It's probably not even focused. But I've gone back to this, and I don't know, Tim. I don't know. I'll fingers crossed I don't get sick anymore. So that's my little anecdotal story. Enjoy that. I'll keep you guys informed about my garlic progress.
Yeah, this sounds very bizarre. Like when you're getting into the story and you're talking about your wizard man that's fixing your back and telling you to eat garlic,
look, that doesn't help my case.
I'm like, quackery. This is like the biggest load of shit, right? Like, that is not a believable story, right?
Well, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just telling you a story.
I know. I'm just saying that, you know, people who you go to a doctor, right, and instead of giving you medical science, they tell you to eat some random supplement. Usually that's BS.
And they're like, look, hear me out. I heard it from a wizard.
Yeah, that's what you say, right? You're making it. If you had not ended this by your discussion about you not eating garlic for a while and then starting to eat garlic again, I'd be like, you are destroying your reputation by saying that you're believing in weird quack medical science, right? But it does kind of make sense that if you've eaten garlic for so long and that's a really
Mhm.
key part of your diet, and then
I
you
love it.
suddenly stop eating that, and then I don't know, maybe your body was relying on, like, I'm not a medical guy, I'm just assuming this is how it works. Your body was relying on garlic for some sort of sickness prevention, and then you stop eating that all of a sudden, and then you get sick all the time, then you start eating it again and you're not getting sick. That kind of makes sense.
Well,
I don't know. Maybe doctors in the comments are probably like, "Oh my god, this part of the podcast is infuriating me," and are furiously typing corrections to what we're saying and explanations. Go for it. I'd love to hear them. But to me, that makes a little bit of sense. If you were just saying, "I've eating no change to my diet over the last decade," and a weird man in a cave, I went to him and he said, "Eat garlic,"
Mhm.
and garlic fixes colds, I'd be like, "That doesn't sound right."
Yeah. So in that situation, I'm in the cave with very rudimentary understanding of medical science and how things work. I spend most of my time playing computer games on computers. And outside of that, the world is largely unknown to me. So that's why I'm prefacing this whole story by saying, me dummy, getting sick, don't know why. Wizard says garlic, garlic fix. That's the story in a nutshell. So I'm happy. Like, my wife is so sick right now. I feel terrible for her. I had to sleep downstairs because she was just coughing all night, like uncontrollably. I'm like, can I do something? Can I get something for you? She's like, no. Like, she got like 2 hours sleep. She's got the that hoarse throat thing because she's been coughing all night. And she actually says today she does, even though she looks and sounds way worse, she says she feels better today than she did yesterday. So hopefully that's sort of, you know when you get to the tail end of it and you start doing that coughing at night thing that's horrific. Yeah. So that's where she's at. And I just feel guilty now because it's like how it used to be. Like, I never used to get sick and she always got sick, and she can't have garlic. So, I mean, what more information do you need, Tim? Like, that's conclusive, right?
Your study of two people has conclusively proven
stability problem solved.
Yeah, I'm always so skeptical of those like weird supplement things.
Well, I mean, if you start getting sick again, mate, I've got 2 bottles. I can.
A spoonful of garlic sounds very unappealing. Like, if I'm just going about my day and eating that, that sounds bad.
Well, maybe people are interested in that, and I can imagine the breath comments in the comments section. So what I do is, you're meant to have it before you eat and stuff like that, so empty stomach type thing. So what I do is I just get out of bed, glass of water, put the 1/4 teaspoon in the water, mix it up. It honestly isn't that bad.
You're not selling this to me. You say put garlic in water and make it garlic water?
It's not. Honestly, I know, I was there. I was like, I don't know if I can do this because I love garlic, but is that
a step too far?
It's honestly not that bad. And you can obviously add more water to dilute it more. Mm-hmm. Just don't smell the water, but I don't find garlic offensive, so it doesn't bother me too much. It doesn't taste that bad. And then you just go brush your teeth, Listerine, you're good to go. Like, my wife, who, she cannot stand the smell of coffee and garlic. Those 2 things trigger her. But after I brush my teeth, Listerine, she's none the wiser. So it must work. So all I'm saying is, yep. And you just have to do that twice a day. So, and you're good to go. But I, as I said, I only do it when those around me start showing symptoms that they're failing. I'm like, crap.
And just to confirm, this is your medical advice.
My medical advice. Well,
right.
Yeah, I mean, I want to take credit for it, but the Wizard is the one that probably should take credit.
But you're saying that everyone should buy the Hardware Unbox branded garlic supplement, and you're going to make millions of dollars. Hey, that's just under the table.
What is it? Get our nutraceuticals from the Hardware Unbox. On that note, you should probably start talking.
Right. Well, on that note, we're not making money from this. Right. Do your own medical research, people. Go speak to actual doctors about your supplement. I'm not putting any of that shit on the Hardware Unbox store. Anyway, I have not been doing my own medical research and taking garlic supplements or weird shit to fix my sickness because I generally don't get sick. So I'm more in your pre-garlic days of when you used to eat normal amounts of garlic. And to be fair, I actually do eat just normal amounts of garlic in my diet.
Okay,
so
well, that's good.
Just normal.
could be something in that, but yeah, each to their own anyway. Go on, continue.
Yes, well, I didn't get sick of Computex this year, so I was very happy at that result because last year I was wrecked before Computex with an infection, and then after I got back from Computex, just got really sick. This year,
I was
smooth sailing.
On the final day of Computex, Bale and I were like, do we leave a man behind? No, we were seriously actually trying to work out what to do with Tim because he was going downhill quick. It was quite concerning, but yeah.
I think I had like 3 or 4 good days at Computex last year, and that was coincided with the days we actually had to do things. And then on all the other days, no, not good. But this year, changed a few things. Yeah, just eat a bit healthier, drink a lot more water, those sort of things. And I think that helped a little bit. But again, I've got no idea. So if a wizard could have told me to drink more water, and maybe that was my fix. But I haven't been doing too much apart from listening to your garlic story, to be fair.
Well, I mean, what else do you need to do?
Yeah, I don't know. Just I have to go on my own garlic journey. Maybe there's some other sort of thing that I can take, and
you can start growing it or something.
To be fair, I probably could grow garlic. It's pretty cheap though, so it's probably not worth growing too much of. But maybe it's better if you grow it yourself. Maybe it gives you superpowers. I don't know. I did play this week the Alan Wake 2 Night Springs DLC, which I would recommend for people that enjoyed playing Alan Wake 2. Sometimes with those, like, it's like a short couple of hour DLC that you get if you have the premium version or something. I don't know how it works. There's some way to pay for it. Go look into it. If you enjoyed Alan Wake 2, I think it's a really good DLC. A lot of DLCs for games that are like the short couple of hour things can be pretty crap some of the time, like don't really add too much. This version of the DLC is like 3 unique sort of like almost TV episode length sort of stories where you go around and just do really weird, unique things. I quite enjoyed it. I thought it was a good DLC that was worth playing. So I enjoyed getting back into Alan Wake 2 and playing that. And I think they're planning a bigger DLC for later this year. So I'll be all over that. But I really enjoyed Alan Wake 2 when I played it last year. DLC, highly recommend it. Was enjoyable. So that's my sort of gaming story for now. Haven't done too much other gaming at the moment. And I probably won't over the next 2 weeks because the Olympics are on. And I enjoy going and watching all the weird stuff that happens at the Olympics, all the sports you don't usually see or get broadcast on TV, like handball and archery and fencing and all those things. So I always enjoy the Olympics. And because it's in Paris, it's on, for at least Australian time, it's like a nighttime thing. So a lot of the events start around like dinner time and after. So that's usually my gaming time. But instead, I think in the next couple of weeks, I'll be, I don't know, checking out some of the things that are on at the Olympics. Not the swimming, though. I find that really boring. So not that, even though Australia's really good at swimming. Not that, all the other stuff. That's that. Do you watch much Olympics?
No, I haven't. Historically, no. I've not really watched any Olympics. So, yeah, I don't know.
Not an Olympics guy.
Well, I don't know. I haven't watched it, so maybe I would be. Maybe if I watch it, I'll get addicted, and then I'll be like having a hangout for another, 4 years or something. I don't know. It's just,
yeah, just become an expert in all the obscure sports. I guess they're not obscure if they're at the Olympics, are they? It's kind of like a major sport, maybe.
I'm not sure. I'll let you work that out.
Well, it's on at the moment. Well, actually, the opening ceremony, as we speak on this podcast right now, the opening ceremony hasn't occurred yet. Yet there are some events that have been played. So I don't know why there's events before the opening. That makes no sense. Just have the opening before the sports start, but whatever. The opening ceremony, I think, is tonight or something. Not that I watch that, but just the sports and stuff. So if you're interested in the Olympics, it's on at the moment. I always enjoy checking out all the stuff that you don't normally get televised and the other interesting things that are going on. So that's it for this podcast, I think. Hopefully everyone's enjoyed Steve's garlic story, Steve's medical advice from Dr. Steve. We'll check back in with Dr. Steve
Tune in next week.
I'll have more. Episode.
I'll have updates and I might visit the wizard again and I'll have more information for you.
We'll have your supplement journey as you go towards
check the
scamming people.
Store.
I mean advertising things.
I mean, I think that was always the natural progression for this channel, right?
I think that's how it works, right? I mean, if we don't make too much money doing tech reviews, the one way to get megabucks apparently is selling supplements. So we'll do that.
People thought it was going to be thermal paste, but it's actually liquid garlic.
Well, have you tried thermal paste to solve your getting sick? I mean, it's probably not that good for you, but maybe it'll work.
If the wizard recommended it, I would have tried it, yeah.
All right, we'll end it. I don't want to hear too much more of Steve's medical garbage. So quickly hit the end button. Where's the end button?
Deeply offended.
Watch the video version on the Hardware Unboxed podcast YouTube channel if you're interested. Otherwise, the audio feed is basically the same as the video feed, except you don't get to see us. So there's that. And we'll be back next week, just before Zen 5. So if there's any follow-up stuff relating to Zen 5, and maybe we'll get pricing by then. Fingers crossed there'll be something there. Intel stability issues as well. We'll follow up on that. And yeah, so we'll be back then. But yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.